It's time now for County-Wide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Join Paul David and Brad Miller as they talk with our community's leaders, newsmakers, and people in the know. You'll hear about the hot topics that affect all our lives here in Yavapai County. And now, here's today's County-Wide.
Welcome to County-Wide. I'm Paul David. Very good to have you in studio today. Happy Halloween to you. It's October 31st, 2013. Parker Anderson is in studio with us today. He is the author of Cemeteries of Yavapai County on Images of America, published by Arcadia. You've seen these books before, and I hadn't realized that these books are what you described to me earlier. I thought they were kind of a centennial series that came out during the centennial, but that's not the case.
No, they did put out a few as part of the Centennial Project, but Arcadia publishes regional photo histories nationwide of various areas and themes. How
did you get involved in the history part, Parker?
Well, it really goes back to the 90s. I got involved with Blue Rose Historical Theater, which then at that time connected up to Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott. And, well, the theater group isn't there anymore, but they got me started going on history and research, and I found I was pretty good at the research part, relying more on primary sources instead of folklore.
And you are a historian.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a reputation over in Prescott as a local historian.
Well, the book is great. I've been going through it, and it's Cemeteries of Yavapai County. We should probably make it clear that not all the cemeteries of Yavapai County are in here.
No, there are over 150 cemeteries in Yavapai County. The book consists mostly of some of the more historically significant cemeteries around. And there certainly is room for a volume 2, which I've been contemplating putting together, but for right now, these are some of the more significant cemeteries in Yavapai.
Well, let's get right into it.
Sure.
All right, let's get right into it. Let's go right down the list of the cemeteries you have in here. Citizen Cemetery, where is it, and can be some of the highlights of Citizen Cemetery?
Citizen Cemetery is in Prescott, and it is the oldest cemetery in this part of Arizona, going back to 1864, which is when the Arizona Territory was officially established. And it's hard to believe. It's located on Sheldon Street in Prescott now, which is kind of in the middle of town, but when they first started burying people there, it was out of town.
Yeah, right. Who's in there?
Well, there's many local pioneers buried there, prominent people, including Charles Genung, who was one of the early day ranchers and road builders down in the Yarnell Peoples Valley area. He's buried there. Little Henrietta Behan is buried there. She was the 7-year-old daughter of Sheriff John Behan, who was better known as the enemy of Wyatt Earp.
Really? Okay. Go with more. Tell me more about that.
Well, most Earp historians, and I'm not an expert on the Earps, but most Earp historians have John Behan as one of the top officials down in Tombstone. He'd been in Prescott first, and between the two warring factions in Tombstone, Wyatt Earp was on one side and Behan was on the other. But before either of them went there, Behan was in Prescott, and his little 7-year-old daughter died at some point and is buried in Citizens.
And we have pictures.
Oh, yes. The book is made up of various old photographs that exist, as well as some new photographs that were taken for the book of the cemeteries as they look today.
Now, we had the Yavapai Cemetery Association in studio before, and they came along, and what I noticed in your book on several occasions was your reference to the fact that a lot of these cemeteries, they've been here forever. Loved ones are buried there. People of significance are buried there.
Yes.
But while the cities and towns look at these historical structures that were built back in the day and restore those and save those, these cemeteries were forgotten.
A lot of them were. A lot have fallen into neglect, and frankly, until the Yavapai Cemetery Association came along, Citizens Cemetery spent many years in neglect. And Yavapai Cemetery Association was initially formed by Pat Atchison for the sole purpose of cleaning up and doing restoration work on Citizens Cemetery.
Fantastic. Pioneers Home Cemetery. We're just going to kind of go down the list of the cemeteries he has listed in this book, and like we mentioned earlier, just a couple minutes ago, that maybe there'll be a volume 2 where we can include some other cemeteries. But Pioneers Home Cemetery, where's that one located, and who's in there that's of significance?
Well, for starters, the Arizona Pioneers Home is a rest home for the elderly. It's one of only 2 state-owned rest homes in America. And they have their own cemetery where many of their residents have been buried over the years. And buried in their cemetery on Iron Springs Road in Prescott are people like Charlotte Hall, the prominent Prescott historian. The famous artist Kate Corey is buried there. And also Mary Cummings, who is better known to historians as Big Nose Kate, Doc Holliday's woman.
Okay, now let's go a little further. Tell me more about Big Nose Kate and Doc Holliday.
Well, basically, again, the people who follow the Earp story know that Doc Holliday and his woman, it's in dispute whether they were married or not. They all were down in Tombstone together, and then they left after the gunfight at the OK Corral. But Doc died in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, but Kate lived on for many years afterwards and returned to Arizona, and she did petition in her old age to be admitted to the Pioneers Home. And the story goes that they initially turned her down until she sent a personal appeal to Arizona Governor George Hunt, who used his influence then to get her in there.
That is a great story. So Big Nose Kate.
Yes.
And they had another name for her. Wild Kate? Crazy?
Rowdy Kate.
Rowdy Kate.
Yeah.
Rowdy Kate.
And like everything else connected with the Earps and Doc Holliday, it's in dispute whether that she was ever really called that in her lifetime.
Oh,
but
really?
There's so much about the Earp story that's in dispute by historians.
I'll be darned. I'll be darned. Excellent. And both of these cemeteries are in very good shape right now.
Yes, they are. They're well cared for. Oh, and in the Pioneers Home Cemetery, there are not 1, but 2 Billy the Kid pretenders.
There we go. Thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Old guys who claim to have been Billy the Kid, but who probably were not.
Well, one was proven not to be, right?
Well, they never did go forward with the results. Back in 2005, a group of history revisionists went into the Pioneers Home Cemetery and dug up the grave of John Miller, who I guess had claimed to be Billy the Kid, hoping to find some DNA things to prove that he was. And they got in trouble because they didn't go through the proper channels to get permission to exhume the grave.
Oh.
There is also Henry Smith in the same cemetery who also claimed to be Billy the Kid, and we can be very grateful that they didn't know that he was there, or they'd have probably dug him up also.
Okay, that is very good. We got to take a break. Parker Anderson is in studio today. He's the author of Cemeteries of Yavapai County, out by Arcadia Publishing. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life.
Ready or not, here I come.
Take time to be a dad today.
Daddy, I'm gonna find you.
They say that when you're facing extreme danger, your life flashes before you. If you think that's sad, consider facing it before you even have enough life to flash before your eyes. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Deaths and injuries can be prevented by using the right car seat. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to know what is appropriate for each age and size.
When you're out there, there's no telling what you'll find.
I see it, I see it. Oh, look at you.
There are some moments only the forest can inspire. Find yours at discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to Countywide. I'm Paul David. Parker Anderson in studio today, the author of Cemeteries of Yavapai County. This, we're hoping maybe a volume 2 will come out, and you'll be back for then.
Yes.
By that time, for sure, for sure. Okay, we talked a little bit about Citizen Cemetery, Pioneers Home Cemetery in Prescott. Let's go right in the middle of the mountain here. Tell me about, and I did not know this even existed, Jerome Hogback Cemetery.
Yes, that was the first Jerome Cemetery, and it's located on a hill which, due to its shape, was nicknamed the Hogback.
You can see that. There's a picture of you standing
Yes,
there in the cemetery, and it does look like a hog's back.
Yes,
okay.
it does. But that was the earliest Jerome Cemetery, and early day citizens, the last known burial there was in 1919.
Wow, and who was that?
A guy named Ed Lee, I believe.
Yeah.
Anyway, that cemetery, like Jerome itself for many years, fell into disrepair. And today, now and then some Boy Scout troops come in and try to clear out some of the brush, but it still doesn't have the upkeep that one would like it to, but people are doing the best they can. What's interesting about the Hogback Cemetery is how many unmarked graves there are also there, or ones that just do have markers but no names, and how a lot of miners and their kin are buried there, and they didn't have a lot of money when the mines were operating, and they made do with what they had. A lot of hand-carved stones, crosses made out of metal pipes, and things like that.
I noticed that in the book, that cemetery, if you compare it to like Citizen Cemetery or Pioneer's Home, that cemetery, Hogback one, has a very different look than the other ones. There's a lot of fencing and caging there.
Oh yes, a lot of the graves in the Hogback have wrought iron fences around them. A lot of that was due to try to keep the coyotes from coming in and digging at the graves.
So, these three cemeteries that we've talked about so far, anything that really stands out in any of them that just was like a wow factor for you?
Just at how simple and reverent they are. I mean, you go back east, you have cemeteries where wealthy people bought huge ornate statues and stuff to place on the graves of their loved ones in other parts of the country. You don't have that here. I mean, it kind of shows the income gap, I guess, but you had basically settlers and miners and ranchers, and they didn't have very much, and they buried their loved ones, and there's a lot more reverence in the simplicity, I think, than with the ornate monuments back east.
Let's say the Jerome Hogback Cemetery, there is an entranceway there. I mean, can anybody go in there and take a look at it? Or?
Oh yeah. I mean, sometimes I know up there in Jerome they've had some trouble with tourists who are a little careless in there, but there's nothing really to bar your way from visiting if you know where it's located. And it's a little hard to find. It's off the beaten path.
Is there a road to it?
There's a road to it. It's a dirt road, and it's kind of rocky, but you can get to it.
I'll be darned. Yeah, and in the book, you've got these really great pictures of the cemetery up front. And it's just, you know, the tipped over wooden crosses.
Yes.
And the tall weeds that are as tall as the gates that are holding and you know, keeping the coffin and the body safe. And then in the background, you got Jerome.
Yes.
And as I mentioned before the show, and I think I mentioned it earlier in the show here today, it's really amazing how we're so quick to go out and rescue this old ancient building, which of course is wonderful.
Yes.
We need those historical buildings, but then the people that built them,
yeah, they're forgotten. They're forgotten.
that's a shame.
A lot of these old cemeteries, even the records of who's buried there anymore aren't complete, the surviving records.
I imagine in Jerome it would be difficult with 15,000 people living there, like you said, miners, and so I guess if you died, you just put in the ground.
There are people in the Jerome Historical Society who've been trying to catalog all known burials in the Jerome cemeteries, so that's good, but it's impossible to find them all, the identities of them all.
Jerome Pioneer Cemetery. Tell me about that one.
Yes, it's down the mountain farther from Jerome than the Hogback. In fact, it is now being encroached by Clarkdale and Cottonwood development.
Wow, okay.
But it was established after the Hogback Cemetery became full, and again is inhabited mostly by local miners and their families. And they started burying people there about 1919 and stopped in the 1930s when the mining ended and Jerome itself became a real ghost town for a while. So there have been no official burials in the Jerome Pioneer Cemetery since the 30s, although there have been about 3-4 unauthorized burials there in later years, as late as the 80s.
Now, you did say that there's some of these cemeteries, obviously there's family members throughout the years that have actually gone in and cared for these plots.
Oh yeah, there are descendants around yet. Both of Jerome's cemeteries, there are a handful of grave plots that are being well kept up and have flowers on. That means there still are some family descendants around who know their loved ones are there.
Excellent. Let's do one more. Clarkdale Valley View Cemetery.
Yeah, Valley View over in Clarkdale. It's a very old cemetery, but it still is in use yet today.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you live in Clarkdale and die there, you can still be buried there.
Anybody historically significant in the Clarkdale Valley View Cemetery?
Maybe, and let me qualify that.
Okay.
There's a famous Clarkdale lawman in history named Jim Roberts, and I'm sure listeners on this side of the mountain probably have heard of him. He has 2 graves.
Oh, really?
Most historians believe he is buried in Clarkdale Valley View, but at the same time there's a marker for him in the Jerome Pioneer Cemetery too, and nobody seems to really know for certainty which one he's in.
Really?
Yes, it's a mystery of this area, and I've got pictures of both markers in the book.
Oh, so I'm picturing maybe he was up in the one in Jerome. 1919, you said, was the last burial there, and then maybe he got moved? We don't know, though, for sure.
We don't know. We don't know. Oh. He died in 1934, so it would have been a little later than 1919, but he's got markers in both cemeteries.
Maybe family got tired of walking all the way up the hill.
Who knows?
Put a marker down below so it's lower. I don't know.
I don't know either. If anybody listening knows the answer, please contact us. We'd love to know.
Yeah, that would be an interesting point. Okay, Parker Anderson is in studio today. He wrote Cemeteries of Yavapai County, put out by Arcadia Publishing. I'm Paul David. This is Countywide. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
Ronnie had huge aspirations.
He knew he could get pills in the community.
He found his body in an apartment in Telford.
I never thought my son would take prescription drugs without a prescription.
Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
Son, tell him that I've begun to dream of things to come, and tell the trees not to look for me. I'm going to find some peace of mind. Wake the sun. Wake the sun, wake the sun, wake the sun.
I would steal pills from my friend's mom.
We talk about all the common drugs, but never prescription medication.
I was addicted to pills.
Had I more knowledge, I would have done things differently.
Secure your medications and talk with your kids. Visit drugfree.org.
A single ember from a wildfire can travel over a mile. That ember can ignite and destroy your home or community. You can't control where that ember will land. Only what happens before it does. Visit fireadapted.org to learn how you can help protect your community from wildfires.
Welcome back to Countywide. Parker Anderson is in studio today. He wrote the book Cemeteries of Yavapai County, put out by Arcadia Publishing. It's available right now for pickup. We've got a few minutes left in the program. You have on this book, Chapter 9 is Isolated Burial Spots.
Isolated graves, they're not so common anymore today, but in the old days it was a lot easier to bury people even outside of cemeteries, on your own property or something. And there are a few of those graves around. For example, on the grounds of Charlotte Hall Museum in Prescott, there's a grave for Pauline Weaver. He was an old Army Scout pioneer, one of the first settlers in what became the Arizona Territory. He was originally buried in San Francisco, but later was exhumed and moved to Prescott, and his grave is there all by itself on the Charlotte Hall grounds.
Wow. Why him?
Because of his significance to Arizona, which is why they brought him back. And people like Charlotte Hall got permission to do so because they felt he should be here.
I'll be darned. Any other ones you could talk about?
Well, there are a number. There are, let me see, out in one area along the old Black Canyon Highway, there's a grave of a little pioneer child who died in the 1880s. It's still kept up by descendants of the family.
I'll be darned. All right. Well, just so folks know, we've also, in this book, you have the Skull Valley Cemetery, Congress Pioneer Cemetery, Congress Cemetery, and then you've also have a chapter dedicated to ghost towns, which I imagine there's talk of Jerome.
No, actually a true ghost town is one where nobody's living anymore.
Oh, okay, okay, so not past ghost towns, but ghost towns where?
There are scores of ghost towns around Arizona. There used to be a lot more towns here than there are now.
Okay.
But most of the ones that are in the book include Octave and Weaver, which are in the central part of the county, down in the desert area.
Okay.
And they still have some little old cemeteries. Most of these ghost towns only have some like building foundations and some cemeteries. We've got Nelson, which is up along the ghost town up along the Mojave County border, and Humbug, which has some ruined buildings and a cemetery, but is almost impossible to get to if you don't own an off-road vehicle.
Really? Now, is this stuff all mapped out? Is there like a map you can purchase to go see these places?
The ghost towns? There are some books available on ghost towns in Arizona, but since these towns officially no longer exist, most of them are no longer officially on the state map.
I'll be darned. Well, our time is up. Parker Anderson, thank you so much for coming in today and talking about your book, Cemeteries of Yavapai County. That's today's show. I'm Paul David. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you again next time.
This has been Countywide, a special presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. Listen in each Tuesday and Thursday as we tackle the hot topics and talk to the decision makers across Yavapai County. That's Countywide with Brad Miller and Paul David each Tuesday and Thursday on this Yavapai Broadcasting station.